While the crew of the Rocinante have escaped Ganymede, and Bobby has found a way forward by working for Avasarala on the problems of the proto-molecule, the seeming sense of them all being safe is an illusion. For Bobby and Avasarala, the conspiracy using the proto-molecule is a threat to the two of them, the Assistant Undersecretary's power and position, and Bobby's freedom. And for the escaping Martian gunship, the fact that what was in the glass case has decided to hitch a ride on board their ship. The recurring theme for the four characters at this time is cognitive dissonance. This is the condition when one holds two contradictory ideas in one's head at the same time, and the brain's desperate need to reconcile this contradiction. It can be mild, like if you see yourself as a good person but do something bad to someone else, you tell yourself that you wouldn't normally do it, but this person deserves it. Or it can be more severe, such as a disaster of such scope that it makes one aware of how easily their life could be destroyed, and so complex rationalizations are employed. A large-scale conspiracy was at work, or some once-in-a-lifetime combination of random chance, or a few nuts who got freakishly lucky this one time. One can't live with the threat, so in these resolutions one finds a way to say that it isn't a threat, or that if it is a threat, you control it by your very awareness of its causes. You can't handle the conflict, so you impose your own order upon it. With Bobby, it's fear that, by working for Earth after spending her entire life convinced that they were at best a bloated and fallen wreck, and at worst, her enemy, Bobby fears that she has become a traitor. She has to repeat into a mirror that she isn't a traitor, in fact. But the stone walls her fellow Martians erect whenever she tries getting information convinces her that at the very least they think she is a traitor. It takes an explanation by Avasarala to explain why, in fact, it indicates the opposite. If Bobby was seen as a traitor, they would attempt to use her as a funnel of misinformation. The fact that they tell her nothing only means that they're trying to figure out Avasarala's game. This doesn't change her own sense of frustration, and wondering if she's wasting time with this back-channel crap of theirs when they should be dealing with the monster. This frustration winds up being a great help, though, because it so puts her on edge that she gets on Avasarala's personal assistant over a trivial eccentricity, and it's only his unusual response to it that she realizes that something is up, learning that the assistant, in fact, is working for the Cabal. Holden's true problem is reconciling his self-image with the reality that he's been killing a lot of people for some time now. He's doing so for good reasons, eliminating pirates that prey upon those helpless in the wake of war, or those who are attempting to exploit during the catastrophe. But the fact that the system has become a place without ideals, that at any time he can find something that he can look at and say, this is a righteous thing, he is prepared to not only stand up with it, but fight for it, even when fighting isn't needed. His overreaction to the proto-molecule is one of those things. When they discover the proto-molecule creature on board the Rocinante, he and Amos try to deal with it, but Holden winds up pinned and wounded, unable to be freed by the others, locked in the cargo bay with it. The only way to deal with it seems to be to shake it out the doors and then burn it up with the engine, but to try to do that will kill Holden too. While Holden is committed to his crew and will do anything to protect them, his quick and easy leaping to the conclusion to do exactly that shows he so fears the proto-molecule, he's still prepared to be irrational about it. The same as with his other solutions to things. What's the quickest and easiest solution? And the answer is almost always violence. Prax is in the awful position of not knowing about May, which leads to his own conflict. He has done nothing since the Ganymede incident, as it is now being called, that does not help in the search for his daughter. Even just eating and sleeping were only because he could no longer search effectively for her while he was exhausted and malnourished. The discovery of Kotoa's body dashed his hope that those who took her were intent on keeping the children alive. He cannot give up on the search. He simply can't, not without knowing what happened to her. But the facts are all undeniable as well. To cope with the contradiction, he repeats out loud, over and over, "My daughter is probably dead," to acclimate himself to the undeniable facts. He can become used to them, can desensitize himself to them, so that he can then continue the search. Maybe he's just searching for a dead body now, searching for definitive proof that it's over and he doesn't have to worry that she's suffering somewhere. Or maybe the space left in probably dead has left just enough room for still alive. Prax uses the analogy of a pine cone that only releases its seeds once it has burned hot enough. The destruction is necessary in order to be able to be reborn. It's thanks to Prax being well enough to think clearly now that he's able to cope with the monster and save Holden's life. As he notes, the creature is following a radiation gradient, similar to the way that a nutrient gradient is followed by a plant root. The protomolecule thrives on radiation, so the creature is drawn to it. And thanks to some quick thinking, Prax himself throws out a radioactive bit of bait to lure the creature out of the ship and saving Holden's life. Avasarala is the one who should be most capable of noticing the conflict, and yet is the one that does not. She notes that Nguyen's fleet has been rebuilt, and quietly, something far beyond what that man is capable of doing. And she is cagey. She suspects that assigning her to Venus is likely intended as a distraction from Mars, something that she can't fathom. Venus, of course, is something else she can't fathom. When the exploratory ship, the Arbogast, is suddenly disassembled down to the last screw in mid-flight, leaving the entire crew to die in the sudden vacuum. Their suits were disassembled as well. She's horrified and can't understand how anyone can worry about anything else in the face of such a threat. She asks Bobby for her perspective as a soldier, since Nguyen is the most visible opponent to peace. And Bobby points out that if the threat comes, I can find myself too weakened to fight off my opponent afterwards. If I deal with them now, consolidate my power, I don't have to worry about any opposition after the threat is dealt with. After all, if I'm destroyed either way, then better the devil I know is destroyed first, lest it kill me once I've saved us all from the devil I don't. What's interesting to note, incidentally, is that when either Avasarala needs to explain something to Bobby, or vice versa, it's always from the perspective of the other person, not the one doing the explaining, to see how that person takes this new truth on board. When Avasarala's assistant arrives with proof that Bobby is, in fact, a deep-cover Martian intelligence operative, Avasarala sees through it on a gut level, eventually deduces how the file has been faked. The pieces quickly come together for her, figuring out that Ehrenreich is the major player in the UN who is involved in the Cabal, the one who enabled Nguyen to fight his little war, and is buying the new species from Mao's company. The assistant is fired, but Ehrenreich has already made his move, telling Avasarala to go to Ganymede on a diplomatic mission, and considering the military situation, she'll be using the personal ship of Mao himself. She quickly has the political situation figured out. If she doesn't go, she'll be removed from power. And if she leaves the ship, she'll be removed from power. But if she goes along and loses net access and the captain refuses to head to the nearest port, then she can seize control of his ship and remain in power. And if she's in power, she can do something about Venus. So that's why the power is so important. It's not just about her benefit. It's the stakes of the entire human race. And yet, Avasarala is so accustomed to seeing politics as a game they play, even if people die, that she has convinced herself that people at her level don't die. They're marginalized or stripped of position. She's so accustomed to thinking that she's untouchable, safe, that when the fighting breaks out between Earth and Mars, and Bobby tenders her resignation, Avasarala makes the point that it would accomplish nothing other than allowing Bobby to kill some Earthers. And if that was all she wanted, Bobby should just kill Avasarala. It was meant as a rhetorical device, but to her horror, beneath the mask of course, Bobby openly weighs the merits of killing Avasarala before deciding that, no, she's right, she won't kill the old lady. Even this situation, though, is mentally dismissed as an anomaly. Despite protests from both Bobby and the head of her personal security, Avasarala believes that her life is in no danger, despite the lengths the Cabal has gone to in order to develop this weapon, to manufacture an entire war around it. She cannot fathom something as sloppy and base as having her killed. And yet, that is precisely what her enemies will do if necessary. The game as she knows it is over. There's a new order to things now.